Welcome to Cut the Bull, an insightful podcast which addresses the news of the day and the cultural issues plaguing our society, bringing logic and context to these topics and discussing solutions too real for mainstream pundits. Now, here are your hosts, Charles Love, Shamika Michelle, and Wilfred Riley.
Hello and welcome to Cut the Bull. I am Charles Love, alongside my co-host Shamika Michelle and Wilfred Riley. And our guest this week is David Horowitz. He is a noted conservative commentator, founder of the David Horowitz Freedom Center, the author of the best-selling new book, I Can't Breathe, How a Racial Hoax is Killing America. David, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So I know we're going to have an interesting conversation here talking about race and policing. We talk about that a lot here. You know, Will, political science professor, talks a lot about the numbers in policing. And, you know, I have a book coming out, Race Crazy, where I break down BLM. And, you know, Shamika is Shamika. But, you know, there's more than one way to skin a racist here. And you take a different approach in your book. And I know you highlight some of the police shootings and break down what actually happened versus what is in the media. So let's talk about why you wrote this particular book, I Can't Breathe.
Well, I've been writing about racial things for 60 years or more. I marched in my first civil rights demonstration. It was actually a Communist Party demonstration in 1948. And it's been a preoccupation of mine. I've written 3 books on race, one called Progressive Racism. And I knew, of course, from the beginning, when they arrested 4 officers for the killing of George Floyd or the death of George Floyd, depending on your point of view, I noticed that 2 of them were minorities. And one of
Paul said, it's actually getting louder now. It was getting louder. Did you all hear that getting louder?
Yeah, I turned it off. I was slower.
It's clear now.
2 of the 4 officers charged, comprehensively charged with murdering were minorities. One of them was black. He joined the Minneapolis police force to fight racism. So Harry race back into his behavior at the other aspect. And then at the end of this saga, after the trial, 60 Minutes interviewed Pete Ellison, who was the Attorney General for the state of Minnesota, and therefore the chief prosecutor on the case. It was Ellison who suppressed the videos that showed how solicitous the police officers were when they first tried to arrest him. Right? How out of his mind he was. He was delirious. He was obviously very high, very powerful drug. He was already screaming, I can't breathe, but nobody was touching him. He couldn't follow a command for more than 3 seconds. When they interviewed Pete Ellison suppressed these videos because they showed that those cops were not malicious, they were not racially motivated. They were concerned about his well-being. They called an ambulance. Right after this mock trial, I mean, if you want a classic lynching, except for hanging somebody from a tree, that's what happened in the Minneapolis trial that I showed them. You have the President of the United States praying that he would be a guilty verdict. You have Maxine Waters traveling into the state to demand guilty, guilty, guilty. And you have all these self-appointed vigilantes threatening the jury, and everybody knew that there would be riots if the officers were convicted. 60 Minutes actually interviewed Pete Ellison, and viewers who don't know, Pete Ellison spent 11 years as a spokesman for the worst racist, anti-gay, bashing Jew hater in America. hating bigot, Louis Farrakhan, for 11 years. He was the chief prosecutor in the case. He was interviewed by 60 Minutes. And they asked him, was there a racial element to the death of George Floyd? And his answer, we couldn't find one. Well, if he couldn't find one, it's not for one of looking. And that means I couldn't find a single witness to say Derek Chauvin getting upset. And when people get bent out of shape, they say things they regret later. They couldn't find one witness to him saying something negative about black people, which is remarkable in itself. So there was no racial element, and that's of every single case that Black Lives Matter has brought. Of course, the family of George Floyd, who was not a typical, it's insulting to black people to say that because George Floyd died when he was high on fentanyl and resisting arrest, that all black people are implicated. Black people are not criminals. This guy was a lifetime career criminal and an armed robber. And they awarded him the city of Minneapolis just to fix this lynching. Awarded his family $27 million so something horrendous had been done. Now, the video was horrendous looking, but if you do the research that I did, you'll find out that they used this technique 247 times in the previous 5 years. Nobody ever died. If your windpipe is not on the side of the neck, it's here. And the purpose of the knee on the side of the neck is just to cut off the blood flow to protect the guy who was drugged out of his mind as well as people around him. But if you look at, take a case that looks even more horrific, the death of Breonna Taylor. Oprah Winfrey was once really the poster person for how America has transcended racism. Here's a woman whose grandfather was a sharecropper, grew up in segregated Mississippi, the most racist state in the union, became the richest woman in America by attracting an audience of middle-class white women who've never been to a sensitivity training session. And who are compelled by her talents and her intelligence and her form. I mean, in other words, related to her like another human being and not some, inferior person.
You're on mute.
Oprah Winfrey took out 26 billboards, one for every year in Breonna Taylor's life, calling for the indictment of the officers, obviously for murder, and saying that she was murdered in her sleep.
You're still on mute. You're on mute.
She wasn't even a technical health worker. She served as drug dealer whose business was killing black people, selling heroin, fentanyl, cocaine. He was a big drug dealer in Louisville. She used her mailing box as a drop box for his drug distribution. She used her bank account to hide his ill-gotten gains. She rented a car for him in which a dead body turned up in the trunk. We all do stupid things for reasons of the heart, but there's a point in which you have to take warning for what it is. And she was killed because they got out of bed. It was 12:30 at night. The cops had announced before they had a no-knock warrant who they were. It was pitch black, and her stupid boyfriend fired at the police and wounded one of them. And the police, who have families they want to return alive to, They have a saying, everybody knows it. It's called pray and spray, which means it's pitch black. You don't know how many people are shooting at you. You don't know precisely where the shots are coming from. So you pray and you spray the area with bullets and hope you kill them before they kill you. That's how she died.
Well, let's talk about those, because those are the two. You write in your book about 26 cases you pick apart, and we'll talk about some of those, and we highlight some of those. But they're the biggest, so I want to get their Shamika and Will's take on both George Floyd and then a little bit about Breonna Taylor. And as far as George Floyd is concerned, like some people will hear what you say and take a issue with how it's described, like the technique that they used, or, why are we talking about his background, or all these other things. We've heard it all, and we can talk about that. But I do have to agree and highlight the fact that whatever was happened here and whether all the officers were wrong is telling that the investigation is the same with Michael Brown. They could not prove that it was race. And we were waiting for that shoe to drop. Everybody was happy that Chauvin was found guilty, but we were waiting on the, clear-cut evidence that this was done simply because he was black. We never got that. But the country burned from it, and no one's talking about that. So
all on the myth of what I call the hoax that America is some kind of racist. Look, nobody came out initially and defended Derek Chauvin. So if that's the case, and not the police chiefs are black, the city council, they're all Democrats, and the chair is black, and the attorney general is black, and you go on and on. How could this happen? How could there be an open hunting season on blacks when you have thousands of black attorneys, thousands of black district attorneys, you have attorneys general, you have black mayors, black city council, black congressmen. Our whole national security apparatus practically has been run by black people for years. So it's just a myth. And the worst thing, one of the worst things I have in my book is a statement from Bill Russell, who was obviously a famous basketball player. I've admired ever since I was around Bill Russell, saying that black children are scared not of being killed by the Ku Klux Klan, but by police. What a terrible message to send to black youth in this country. And blacks are supposed to be oppressed because they're marginalized. What a joke. The black community is the center of American attention has been for decades. It's crackpot, and it has terrible consequences. My website, frontpagemag.com, we did an article based on this surge in homicides because of the defund police movement, and estimated that 2,000 young black people were murdered because of the defund the police movement.
Will, what do you want to get in here and say?
So yeah, there's a lot there. Obviously, first of all, I don't think that the George Floyd death was, an excellent example of policing. It was a lot more complicated than what the general public perception of the situation was, though. My impression, obviously, kneeling on someone's shoulder, even on their neck, as a 160-pound man, if you're talking about another healthy adult male, that's not going to kill you. That's something you see all the time. And for example, the dojo, the issue with George Floyd was that he was on, you guys might add some things here, but this sort of cocktail of fentanyl and methamphetamine. He probably took that thinking it was Molly or thinking it was ecstasy, by the way. That's a weird combination of drugs to have in the bloodstream. But while Chauvin was on his back in a restraint hold, my understanding is that he basically had a heart attack or OD. If you read through the description of what actually happened. So the question is there a duty on the part of these officers to stand him up or to do something, to bring an ambulance crew in as the guy starts to die? That I think is the sophisticated question that I've talked about. I'm a pistol instructor in KY that I've talked about on law enforcement sort of blogs and so on. The question isn't necessarily did they just set out to murder a black man? I think we all agree that's not the case. But the broader point that I think David's bringing up, I have a question for the author about this because I think it's interesting. In Taboo, I didn't do 26, but I looked at 9 or 10 of these cases. And some of them you could say what you could say in the George Floyd case, perhaps imperfect policing. In others, the guy was wholly at fault. The cops did a great job. But none of them fit the original narrative, which is sort of an innocent, unarmed, law-abiding black guy who could be one of the hosts of this show, is walking to church or a game of hoops, and he's killed by a white officer or a group of white vigilantes or something. And this goes all the way back to Trayvon Martin. I mean, obviously, we're all pretty familiar with that case. But the impression was that Trayvon Martin had been stalked by this white Florida redneck. He tried to escape. He turned around to desperately defend himself. A fight, he gets shot. What actually seems to have happened is that there'd been a bunch of burglaries in this area, and the guy was the head of the local neighborhood watch. He saw Trayvon walking around at 1 a.m., and the two men had words. Then they essentially separated. They parted ways. Trayvon Martin doubled back, started a fight with him. The fight got extremely violent, and the guy who was being beaten to defend himself, Zimmerman, shot Martin once with a small caliber handgun. Zimmerman's also Hispanic, by the way. I mean, his dad, I guess, would be white, but his mom's Afro-Latino. None of the cases, I think this is the point, stood up to the narrative that was originally presented at all. So I guess the question for David would be, I explored this a little bit in Taboo, but why is the narrative so far from the reality? I mean, is this, as we often say on the show,
Because
entirely the media?
you have a state America left, which I was born into, which has been going. It's taken them 50 years of effort to take over the Democrat Party. They run the Democrat Party now, and their agenda is to destroy America. They hate white. I mean, it's amazing how hating white people can become such a norm. But the real target is the founders who are white. And the real target is the Constitution, which is called, laughingly, a code for white supremacy. The words white and black don't appear in the Constitution. And I may say, on the Trayvon Martin case, I'm a conservative deviant. I gotten more personal attacks in my position. I thought that Zimmerman should have been convicted of manslaughter and put away for a long time. He's a crazy guy. He shot Trayvon through the heart. And there's other ways you can stop somebody who's beating you up when he's unaware that you have a weapon, just shooting through the heart. And of course, Zimmerman wasn't a cop. But, I was involved with the Black Panthers in the 60s, and their slogan was off the pigs. This is a radical idea that the system is defended domestically by police and internationally by the military. That we want this unilateral disarmament of one and get rid of the police. And it's very sinister because when you think of the 18,000 local police departments, which is a tremendous protection for the population, unless you think that all 18,000 can go bad at the same time. But what the Democrat Party wants to do is to destroy the local funding and replace them with a national police force, which is fascism, which is what I think they're facing.
Samika, you want to get in? Oh, you got a follow-up, Will?
Yeah, I have just one follow-up question there. And I think, again, David, I've read some of your writing, and I've also read a fair amount of stuff recently from people coming out of sort of the old U.S. left and the new left. I just finished Ron Radash's Commies. But a question that I have about a lot of this stuff I'm a member, I guess, an upper middle class black guy. I have a law degree, live in a heavily black community. What is it? Why does this narrative appeal so much to so many normal seeming white people? I mean, if I were to think of the white community in any way, it would be countrymen, perhaps friendly rivals or something like that. The other great group here. But why do so many whites seem to want to destroy whitey? Is it a my father kind of thing?
People are lazy. They don't, how many people know anything about American slavery or the Constitution, the history of slavery in the world? I mean, I love it that slavery is America's original sin, but it existed in Africa for 1,000 years before a white person ever set foot there, where every black slave in America was enslaved by black Africans and sold at auctions in Benin and Ghana. I know this because I did a little book on reparations about 20 years ago. But, people don't want to, they just want to be thought well of. So I'm a white person, and I'm so sorry for everything we did to you guys. The really horrific aspects of racism was pretty much in the South. It's not like the whole country was segregated. That's not the reality. But you can't even look. I mean, here's a fact that I would be trepidatious about defending in public, but I think I'm going to have to point it out. The slave trade was abolished, outlawed in 1804. And between 1804 and 1860, the slave population increased fourfold, went from 1 million to 4 million. In Brazil, they had to replace the slave population every year. It was so brutal and violent. So even, you can't say America had a relatively benevolent slavery. But if you get into a serious discussion about slavery and segregation and so forth, it becomes much more complicated. And no white person is willing to risk that, or very few. Under attack, by the way, by Raylash, saying that the last election was problematic.
He did go a bit down that path.
He did. He appealed to the IRS to shut me down. How was that? That is fascism. That's what that is. It's ridiculous. Right. I knew this guy we met when I was 12 and he was 14. I'm 83 now, so that's a long time. It was a friendship. Anyway, so I think people are basically intimidated. Most people are sensible and want to stay out of the line of fire.
Right.
There are very few Dave Chappelle's, Norm MacDonald, and right. Very few.
Right. Or Wills or Shamika. Shamika, what do you want to say? You're on mute, by the way.
She's on mute.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, I agree that a lot of white people are just afraid maybe to say something, but those that sometimes do, especially on the left, are very condescending. And I agree with David when he says that he doesn't like the fact that they try to implicate all black people. That's one of the things that bothered me with George Floyd, with Breonna Taylor, all of the people that just because they were black were saying, I am George Floyd, I am Breonna Taylor. I'm not. I wouldn't be in that position where I'm high on drugs and having a tussle with the police. So I don't like the fact that they just act like it's all black people instead of just saying, here was a man who was doing something that he wasn't supposed to do. He was, and he got stopped by the police, and they had a disagreement or a fallout or whatever, and it ended in death. I didn't like the fact that it's always just, oh, he's black and that's why. I don't feel like we're being hunted by the police, and I don't like that narrative, especially when it comes to my children. I don't want my children being afraid of the police, and because I think that creates angst between both parties. If the police stop someone and they think they may be combative, they're already on high alert. If you get stopped by the police, you're already on high alert when we kind of push that narrative. So I wish we would stop making everything about race, especially when it comes to police, because I do agree that there are bad police officers, but I do not believe that they are hunting us down. And when it comes to Oprah Winfrey, I used to look up to Oprah because she was fat, she was dark skinned, she wasn't that attractive, but she became very successful by just being who she was. And that made me feel that I could do the same thing. So when you then listen to her kind of say, well, no, because you're black and black people can't make it, or black people are oppressed, that's very disheartening. And I think it's not genuine. for her to say those type of things, because you made it, Oprah, and you were not a looker. You got here because you worked hard and you were smart, and everybody else can do the same thing.
Right. You're Dave.
Changing dramatic. About 25 years ago, I realized that no matter what I said, and I had one of the reasons that I'm outspoken is I had credentials. I lost, was a line, for civil rights. It's always been a big issue for me. So I felt a little bit invulnerable. But I realized that nothing is going to change until it comes out of the Black community. And what I see is it's coming out of the Black community these days in a very, very big way. We're starting with that Gallup poll that shows that 81% of Black people want at least as much police and more. Because those police, that's the only protection that you guys know that inner city Blacks have. They don't live in gated communities, and they don't have private armies like Tory Bush. And these leftists in the squad, the Black leftists, they stick out like a sore thumb. They're not speaking to Black people, and everybody is beginning to realize that. So I think it's a huge breakthrough going on.
Right. And one of the things I think we lack, my point is always to bring logic to the situation. And if you look at that it's just a simple logical refrain and listen to what they say and pay attention to what makes sense, there's a glaring error in their what they're saying. I was going to say in their logic, but it's not logic. But so they want you to believe that all cops are ACAB, all cops are bad. There's a racist train and they're hunting us down. But in addition to being racist, these cops must be really lucky too, right? Because they hate all Black people and they're hunting us all down. But they're so lucky that every time they get into altercation, even when they're wrong and they use too much force, they just get lucky, and the guy has a record as long as your arm, right? He's had all these convictions, all these arrests, he's a violent felon. So how does that happen? Why aren't they, you talk about just normal people walking down the street, but why aren't they catching those people? Why aren't there, constant video streams of people being shot who were at a prayer service, or who was on their way to donate some money they had won? We don't get those people. I mean, these races are so good that they think all Blacks are the same, but they can tell the difference between a normal Black and that 2% of Black who lives a violent life. So, I mean, have you ever posed that to any of them? And what do they say? What do you think about that weak argument that they're all racist, but they only arrest criminals? You're still on mute, Dave.
They don't think. I mean, they can't really have an argument with them because of that. They assert things, and then they call you names. I'm not intimidated by their assertions. It's really terrible.
So do you have a victim of the 26 that you looked at? Are there some that you said, okay, the cop was wrong here, or even if the cop was right or wrong, but were any of those victims, a regular person, regular citizen with no criminal record?
In one case, well, there's tragic circumstances.
Right. Tamir Rice, right.
He probably didn't. He was too young to realize what he was pulling a gun out of his belt at death places to the house. But the one other case is Orlando Castillo. Mm-hmm. And, he was killed by an Hispanic cop. I think that the verdict, and he had told him that he had a concealed weapon, but so he said, well, we don't know, but I give him the benefit of the doubt, but that shows that he did not want to hurt the cop. And the cop panicked. He just went into a panic when he reached for his wallet. The guy called him for it. I think it was a fair verdict. I think it was, a tragic case, but manslaughter was the proper charge. But I don't really know. And there are cases of people who have mental illness. There was a guy, DeAndre Hamilton, was sleeping on a park bench, and an officer approached him who did not know he had a mental problem and touched him. And he grabbed the officer's whip and struck him in the head, and the officer thought his life was in danger. shot him. That's also a case that you have to be somewhat uneasy with. But it's not a case of a guy saying, oh, here's a black guy, I'm going to kill him because he's black. Terrible messages that are being sent to the black community. And I'm so glad to see people that, the Herschel Walkers, Burgess Owens, standing up. And of course, Candace Owens gave that really terrific blog about George Floyd. So finally, we have reality. We're not dealing with the black community or the host. So from my perspective, a lot is happening that's good. Although the Democrat Party is so powerful, and our universities are gone, and racist institutions. But the Democrat Party is a racist party. How can it be good for the country to be tribal, where you identify people by their skin color, that's their main characteristic? It's horrible. And the Democrat Party, where's the dissenters in the Democrat Party? This is terrible.
So they're probably afraid too. They will get attacked by the mob like anybody else. I gotta assume that there's some of them that realize this is crazy and they don't know what to do. But let's talk about BLM a little bit though, right? Because BLM, I think, has nothing. They started out, I try to give them the benefit of the doubt. Say you really cared about, you saw a problem, whether I agree with the problem or not. They saw a problem with policing in America and they wanted to do something about it. And that lasted about 2 weeks. Instantly they had BDS on their site. Most black people didn't even know what that was, but it was on their website. And then they grew and they started to get money and they changed and they became an organization that only talked about policing, because people used to challenge them and say, why doesn't BLM, people on the right would say, why doesn't BLM talk about black on black crime? Well, that's not what they're in the business for. They're in the business for not even policing. They have a country destroying agenda. And they use these shootings as a way to get eyes on the stuff, that the images they put out there, to gain money and all that kind of stuff. It's just something that they use. So they sit and they wait for it to happen. The number of criminals, the number of police is bound to happen. The shooting happens and they just use it. I don't really think, Will and I were talking before about how they don't even put anything on their site about policing anymore. It's not about policing.
They're sociopaths. His police Colores is a sociopath. I read her autobiography. She doesn't blame anybody in her life for her situation. Her mother was 15, had her third child, was out of the home from 7 in the morning to 10 at night. The man she thought was her father, but wasn't, who abandoned the family and her when she was 6. She doesn't blame him. Her biological father was a drug addict. Not only doesn't she blame him for anything in her life that's done, but she has an argument with him, which he was saying you have to be personally responsible for what happens to you and what you do. And she considers that a racist lie. So I don't accept no personal responsibility for anything. So every black person is innocent because they're black. It's that simple. When these 5 cops were murdered in Dallas by a homicidal maniac named Walter Johnson, he would only negotiate with a black officer. So the police chief of Dallas, like so many police chiefs, are black. He negotiated with him, decided after 2 hours that this guy wasn't serious. He was jokes. He was asking how many people he killed. He was saying how many white people he would kill more white people. So this black police chief took the decision to send, because he was held up in a university in fire, to send in a bomb robot, with a bomb, and blow him up. And in her book, Patrice Cullors makes this a racial attack. He was the first person in the history of the country to be blown up by a robot. She ignores the fact that this guy was a homicidal maniac. She ignores that it's a black police chief who's taking order. It's all about the agenda, as you summarize it. Destroy the country. Fidel, this is such organization considered a racist black people would be an icon for them. Instead, it's Assata Shakur, who murdered in cold blood this New Jersey trooper who had 2 children. He didn't even know whose car he was stopping. He just had a broken taillight. He went over to it, and she shot him. And while he's lying in a pool of blood, begging for his life, he's got 2 kids at home. He's a Vietnam vet. She just executes him and then goes to live in Fidel Castro's island prison. This is who you're dealing with. But the Democrat Party has given them an enormous cover. And it's the Democrat Party endorsement that gives them an improvement tour that they speak to the black community.
Shamika, anything you want to say about BLM?
Well, I definitely agree. I feel like they just kind of profit off of the death of black men. They don't really care. They want to push the LGBTQ agenda. They don't want to have, the traditional style family. They don't like, in my opinion, black men at all, or straight black men. So I definitely think, I could say she's a psychopath, because how can you not like straight black men? And so I agree with you with that. When I was listening to you talk about Assata Shakur, she for so long was kind of, at least where I'm from, heralded as like a hero. So I think it's a lot of teaching that has to kind of be, we have to unlearn a lot of stuff and actually learn what really happened. Because when, like you were saying, Charles, it's always something else pushed besides the truth. And once you hear this lie over and over again, you kind of run with that and believe that. I was grown before I really realized what she actually did. Because for a long time, it just seemed that the FBI they were after her for no reason. She was most wanted for no reason. And it was because she was black. They just hated her, or, So I never really knew what she actually did until I was grown and had to look it up for myself.
And see, one of the things I say about that that's so important, though, is you talk about the truth. And I simply ask, if the police are so bad and the country's so racist and all the stuff is so bad, and that is true, why do you need to embellish? Why do you need to add stuff? Why do you need to twist the story? Just tell people what happened and let them decide for themselves. But they don't, right? They hide stuff, they obfuscate, they do all this other stuff because they don't want you to know what really happened. So you have to ask yourself, why is that, right? So
here's their scale of values. This guy's name was Tony McKay. He's a black, an
transgender,
an African immigrant living in California. Crazy person. Transgender. And the transgender is important because they made him a special case of oppression. They had demonstrations 5 years after his death. He had an affair with a white woman. She had a black son named Mallet. He was 21 years old. He pistol whipped her. He got beat up by her family. He swore revenge. He made a video of himself saying, "I'm going to kill you. And I'm going to take a gun with me because the cops will shoot me, will kill me if I have a gun." Everybody knows that. And I don't want to be in this world, with the police anymore. And he went and he knifed to death this 21-year-old black kid, Mallet. And the cops came and they shot him. And he's one of their martyrs. It's all about the intersectionality below me. That's what it's about.
Will?
Yeah. By the way, that hiss is getting loud again.
Yeah, David, can you mute?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so we've covered a lot of content actually in the past 20 minutes. I mean, just a few quick notes. First, I think the reason that the left doesn't like straight black, stable men is that they don't like straight stable men. I mean, I think there's even more hostility towards straight white or Jewish American stable men, frankly. A second point on sociopathia. I mean, when we look at this in political science, the percentage of human leaders that test as technical sociopaths is very high. It's 70 or 80. So that ability, I used to myself, although I've mellowed with age. I'm pleased to say I'm a few points off the scale now. Full of emotivity for my fellow man and all that type of crap. But anyway, yeah, brother. But I
You're
mean,
like all that crap.
but in all seriousness, though, I mean, what you see with colors is something you very often see with high IQ, motivated but poor start kids. You saw some of this with Barack Obama. The constant obsession with his father, who, as it happened, was an alcoholic Kenyan lord who seems like a much more interesting guy to have a drink with than Barack Obama, in fact. But where he was presented as this sort of saintly, caring figure, and the real problem in the world was colonialism, and Obama was sort of the interracial unifier that was going to bring everyone together. Having that God devil narrative in your mind is a really great motivator if you have to struggle to make it. So, I mean, Colores, I read her book. Some of it strikes me as crazy. A lot of it strikes me as the general motivational story you see from everyone from Joel Osteen comes to mind to Colin Powell. I mean, what's the demon that's going to motivate me to leave this trailer or this project building? Yeah, so there's definitely that. I guess I actually have most of my comments here are really questions. I mean, so when you say that, I don't think that, I could probably debate some of the details as a political scientist, but I don't think there's much debate that the Democratic Party has been to a very large extent taken over by its extreme left wing. When you see a picture of the squad standing in front of, say, the Washington Monument, I think that is something, and by no means the fact that it includes Black Americans or anything like that would be the issue, or really the background whatsoever the members, but it's very obvious looking at positions or looking at something like the t-shirt with Palestine superimposed over Israel, whatever, that this is a group of politicians that would have absolutely shocked most people's ancestors in America of whatever background. That is something that's happened to the Dems. The question of do people want to destroy America, I guess, leads me to two things for the guest. I mean, so David, first, what can Republicans do to actually do outreach to the Black community? I mean, this is something that consistently has been a problematic issue, in that a lot of people, even some of the people you've mentioned, like Candace Owens, have witty, intelligent things to say, but don't seem to appeal to Black audiences. And a lot of the party is very often seen as unsympathetic, if not hostile, to Black concerns. Its ranks are thought to be full of bigots. There's the idea, the response to reparations would be no, not at all, work your way up like everyone else. What would you do to actually pitch some of these GOP ideas to Black people and, avoid the destruction of America, or whatever the case might be?
You muted.
Kind of a rambling lead into that question, but it's a good question.
You still muted.
I had an in with the Bush people because I had two bundlers who took on me to organize their bundling. So we raised a lot of money, so I had access. And I said, you need to have a voucher program that's $100 billion, not this penny-ante stuff that we play that they get $1,500 scholarships. It has to match the tuition for the public school system, and it has to be so big that it can't be ignored. So $100 billion in 2000 is money. I would say now $1 trillion. And I proposed that to Trump, and he actually did. He stepped on it. It's the problem. He's the first Republican politician who made any effort that I could see whatsoever to reach out to the Black community. I think I saw, what's this guy's name, the lefty? No, he's on Fox all the time. He's a Democrat. He said the first time he got a solicitation for a Republican was from Trump in his 30 years. The Republicans, they see race as a minefield that they don't know how to navigate. They don't want to go, for them, it's the third rail. They don't know how to talk about race. And I would say there's a racial element. I mean, it's hard to ignore. There was a study that was done in California in 2000, and it showed that I think it was the legislature actually did a good thing and said we're going to end social promotion. The social promotion is you lie to the kids and their parents and you tell them that they learned something and they didn't, and so you go and hold them back. And then they did a study, and they had to drop the plan to end social promotion because they didn't have enough classrooms. Because they would have to hold back, I forget it was 75% of the school system. So I went to the Republican who was running for the Senate, and I said, you got to hold a press conference, call on FEMA to declare Los Angeles a national emergency and get these kids into schools which will teach them. And his answer to me was, I don't know of a single Republican who has a seat in the Los Angeles area. And then I found out he's paid by the teaching unions anyway. So it's a very serious problem, but it will change with the entry of black voices into the Republican Party. That's what it got to have taken that. And I've seen so many articulate blacks now in the Republican Party. There used to be a lot of race hustlers around the Republican Party. But now you have very intelligent, very articulate, very ballsy people. So again, I have confidence in that. This guy in Kentucky, I think he's an attorney general, the lieutenant governor in Tennessee or Kentucky, I can't remember.
Yeah, it's the attorney general.
Iron Donald. There's just a lot of very smart people who are not going to be pushed aside. It's a slow process. I don't know if the country will be around long enough for them to save it.
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, it has just very quickly. I mean, to some extent, it does have to be a reciprocal relationship. I mean, as a political scientist that's worked with campaigns, I mean, what you said about the quote from the politician in L.A., like, why would we do a lot of work there? There aren't any Republican voters or any Republican seats in that black community. I mean, yeah, that's the basic reason, with morality aside, that you don't get a lot of Republicans stumping in black communities. But if you don't, you're not really going to grow that black Republican base. So, I mean, it has to progress forward. I mean, Trump, by the way, Trump took some major steps in terms of outreach to the black community, like Trump or not. I mean, Platinum Plan, First Step Act. One big problem here for anyone on the right, organized Republican or not, is the media, which is that kind of fourth column enemy, where whatever Trump did, I mean, Trump did constant outreach to people that included guys like Ice Cube. Whatever actually happened, the presentation was, well, 10 years ago, he might have used a racial epithet, if you remember that article. Or like the whole thing of maybe there's a tape out there, we don't know, but we're looking for it. This headline on front page of Vox, is Trump a bigot? So overcoming that is going to be a barrier, but I mean, both sides are going to have to take steps. I mean, just the basic Brexit stuff did get Trump up to, 12% with blacks. So, I mean, there's really nowhere to go but up from 6%.
Well, that's true, but I think that I can't speak as a Republican, but what I will say, another thing, you got to try every angle because you're so far behind, and the politics is important. But I think, with books like David's and others, making the case is important. But that's why I take a different approach. And my thing is, people need to hear and see. Oh yeah, looking back at Taboo, different approach.
Kidding around, but yes.
Yeah, but people need to understand what's happening because David kind of alluded to it earlier that people don't know. You talked to when you asked him about why are whites complicit in this. He said, well, they don't know. Do you think they know the Constitution? This kind of stuff. Well, knowing that they don't know what's going on, imagine what happens. So in my book that's coming out, Race Crazy, November 9th. I actually take quotes from BLM and put it in there. So, because I think that if we led with that, so Shamika says something about LGBT, they don't even say that anymore. It's cis heteropatriarchy. And people are like, that's not even a word, right? So if you highlight these quotes from them, I take their quotes and think, this is what we want. We are abolitionists. We think all police should be abolished. We are anti-capitalists. When you put that language in people's faces, they can't turn around and say, well, you're just misunderstanding what they mean. It's like, no, I think we have to have a whole re-education like they talk about on the left. We need a re-education of America even before you can convince them to vote Republican. David? You still off?
One of you with Wilfred first, that it's got to take coming together. white Republicans and black Republicans. No question about that, but I do think that that's happening. As I say, the problem with Republicans is that for them it's a minefield, but they don't know how to navigate it. They're scared, silly when it comes to racism. Otherwise, they could block. Why? I mean, I've said this so many times. Democrats control every inner city in America that is size. And for 50 to 100 years, there's a Republican in sight in these big cities. Why aren't they mentioning it in every speech that they give? What the hell is wrong with them? They don't like to fight. That's a problem. They're scared. It's a big problem. But I think there's a lot of vets who are involved in this now. I think it's changing. I'm hoping it's changing.
Yeah, I hope so. Shamika, anything you want to add?
No, I was going to say, I think Republicans are scared as well. And that's one of the things that I don't like about Republicans. I mean, of course, I'm not one, but that's one of the things that I don't like. I don't like the fact that they feel like, or so many of them feel like, speaking to black people is useless because they would just continue to vote Democrat. A lot of times it's just because they don't know. Like when it comes to school choice, I believed in school choice. My 3 children, benefited from school choice. I had no idea, though, that there were so many Democrats that were against school choice. And the school that my children went to was predominantly black. It started out predominantly white, but then black people were like, hey, we got an option outside of public schools. Let's do that. And so I think if they knew, or more people kind of knew, I'm benefiting from something that Democrats don't even like, and so we do need to kind of inform them on these things. And if you give up on them, they're just not going to know. So that is one of the things that I think Republicans can do better with, just not being scared. And like when it came to them always calling Trump racist, it would make me mad because I felt like they would just act like, if we don't say anything or if we don't mention it, it'll just go away. And it never went away instead of, facing it head on. Like when they were saying, oh, he called for the murder of the Central Park 5. Well, he didn't. If you read the article, he talked about he felt like murderers should get the death penalty. That jogger wasn't murdered, so it couldn't have been to them, but nobody wanted to kind of face that stuff head on. It was like they felt if they turned a blind eye to it, it would just disappear, and it never disappeared. And that was very frustrating. Like, why aren't y'all speaking up? Why aren't you fighting? Why aren't you saying something?
I think they're more bothered by words. So they were bothered that he called for the death penalty for some people out of his mouth. And that's really bad. That should write him off forever and he should be exiled somewhere. Yet they're constantly trying to empty the prisons of violent prisoners and put them back in communities. So these people have actually stabbed, shot, and raped people. And they are higher on the hierarchy of life than the guy who said some things they don't like. And I think that's part of the problem.
There's actually a fascinating example of this recently, like what we will and won't tolerate as a society, especially with men. Did you guys see this thing with Jordan Brand?
No, I don't think that.
Yes,
Yeah, the CEO
Larry Miller.
of Jordan Brand.
Oh, yes.
Admitted that he killed a guy. There was some conflict. I think it was a conflict between black and ethnic white gangs in that city in that era, but it doesn't really matter. It wasn't a race story. But he's been involved in the gang scene. And a friend had been injured or something like that. I forget some of the details. But he'd gone to the other guy's neighborhood and shot the first young man he found. This guy wasn't gangbanging. There was nothing to do. It was just an act of rage. These were both tough areas. And the guy said, he faced some criminal charges, apparently just lied, got away with it. His girl had given him the gun. And so in his book, in his autobiography, he admits, years ago, I killed a man. In, a tough, integrated city that was fighting constantly, shot a man just to watch him die. The reaction to this,
someone should write a song.
But the reaction to this has been sort of how brave. Yes, there was a great deal of class conflict as well as racial stuff at this time. He's coming forward. He's talking about how this made him a better Christian. And it's worth contrasting this to what the reaction would have been if he'd admitted, say, slapping his wife or making an ethnic joke, or perhaps as a black guy making a gay joke. If he had said, I regularly use homophobic slurs and I'm coming clean about it. I'm going to stop drinking. I'm going to stop doing that. He would have been out of a job immediately. Killing a guy, and it doesn't really matter, black, Irish, Italian, whatever guy in some urban conflict, no one cares. That's a disposable person. That's not part of the woke narrative. So the contrast there is absolutely ridiculous. You can literally admit to murder, but not to say transphobia and keep a job in the American upper middle class. So every society has sins and rules. The only question is what sins and rules are now replacing the old real ones we used to have.
David, last words. You're on mute. You're still on mute.
I want to recommend Dinesh D'Souza's book and several books about the Democrat Party, which I think are eye-opening. So let's remember that the Democrats were the party of slavery, they're the party of segregation, they're the party of the Tammany Hall mafias.
And they're currently the party of segregation.
Of course, but that's the point. When I first saw his books, well, my friend Robert Spencer wrote a book with the title, Did Mohammed Really Exist? And I said to myself, has Robert lost his mind? I mean, it's a religion of 1.5 billion people. Then I read the book, and it's pretty certain that Muhammad never existed. Same thing with Dinesh's books. I was very skeptical at first, but they're quite brilliant, and I think they're illuminating. And when it comes to fighting, this is an endemic thing of the Republican Party that really, it's not about race. 5 out of the 6 battleground states that with the votes were taken from Trump are controlled by Republican legislatures, and they did nothing to prevent their theft of that election. 5 out of 6. That's what Trump got so upset about. The problem is with Republicans.
Yeah. Well, there you go. So that means that we're never really going to fix it because we got.
Oh, I don't agree. To me, the dynamics now of both the black community, but also the Hispanic community, which just is a much bigger minority than black. And I think that just new forces developing, which can take us out of this mess. I can't imagine that the Democrats can win another election.
Wow, that's a bold statement.
I'm just, I just watched this inflation. It's crazy. Yeah. It's crazy. And all these ships at sea, and they keep having the same excuses, blame it on Trump or whatever.
They're gonna use that one as long as they can and milk it until people wake up. Yes, he is David Horowitz, author of the new book, I Can't Breathe, How a Racial Hoax is Killing America. David, thank you for your time.
It's been a pleasure, everybody. Nice to meet you.
Patriot J, I'm saving the day from you commies who lame. No, you can't fuck with me. I got a country to save. God bless the US of A. Land of the free and a home of the brave. God get all of the praise. I got a country to save because I'm Patriot J and I'm saving the day.